Hey VC, it's Jonathan, your cheap and cheerful record collector. Hope everybody's having a great day and enjoying this end of summer, early fall weather. Hope you're not involved with the hurricane down there in the south, and if you are, I hope you're doing okay. This video is going to be a subs contest entry for Andrew from Tales of the Crate, who has 1,000 subs, which is mind-boggling that there's 1,000 subs, but he certainly deserves it. He has great stuff. Always enjoy his channel. The contest was show us about 10 albums from different genres that sort of typify what you like in that particular genre. Trying to see how eclectic people's collections are, how deep they go, and so I thought it'd be great to do. So I went through my collection, sort of broke it down into different categories, and not exactly how I have them broken down as I keep them back here, but in my head how I sort of look at them. So I actually did 11 because I had to have a bonus one. I couldn't stop at 10. So first off, I did basically classic rock, early classic rock, and I had to go with one of my all-time favorites, Buddy Holly, and this is Buddy Holly live, the only unreleased live recordings of Buddy Holly and his Crickets, Volume 1. Obviously they are released because here they are, but previously unreleased. It has interviews with Buddy Holly, copies, versions of Learning the Game from January '59, Buddy Holly on stage doing That'll Be the Day in Peggy Sue and Oh Boy from 1958 recorded. Rip It Up, Little Richard song, did in 1956 in Lubbock, Texas, etc. So the late great Buddy Holly, and that's my first pick for early classic rock. Next one I went is the middle period of classic rock, what I consider the great period of rock and roll. And there's so many great things. I mean, you know, from the Stones, the Beatles, whatever. But I went with one of my favorite albums of all time is Layla, Eric Clapton, Layla and Other Love Songs. Eric Clapton, Bobby Whitlock, Jim Gordon, Carl Rattle, and of course, Duane Allman. One of the great rock albums of all times, I think, for sure. Still holds up after all these years. Fantastic. Layla and Other Love Songs. Then we get into psychedelia. So from Psych, I think is one of the underrated Psych bands. The first two albums are classic Psych. Not every song on it, but certainly there are songs in here that are beyond. And that is Country Joe and the Fish, music, electric music for the mind and body. The first Country Joe album. Just fantastic. Lucky enough to see Country Joe a couple times. Saw him once in Central Park, probably 1968 or so in New York City. Fantastic. And then, of course, I saw him in Woodstock, too. But there it is, the original Country Joe and the Fish with Barry Melton, David Cohn, Bruce Bartol, and Chicken Hirsch on drums. Basically, Section 43 is completely out there Psych song. Superbird is great, of course. Grace, about Grace Slick. Not So Sweet Martha Lorraine. Flying High. If you don't know it, you should know it. Psych. Then I went to jazz. I got a lot of jazz albums. I love jazz. But today I thought I'd do something that I've never seen this guy shown on the VC, and it's a shame because he's one of the early greats, is Bix Beiderbecke. And this is Bix Beiderbecke when he was with the Paul Whiteman band, which was really a terrible band, but he was so amazing that he rose above the band himself. Bix started out born into a upper middle class home in the Midwest, and really couldn't be held to the standards of the Midwest and the days. And I think he was born in 1900. I had it up here a second ago. Hold on. He was born Can't find it now. Born in the early 1900s, he died at 28 years old. He drank himself to death by 28. He played cornet and trumpet. His tone was impeccable. His phrasing and the way he played was no white man or any man had ever played like that before. One of the few guys that Louis Armstrong saw and played and heard him play and said, this man is like, he's the real deal. If you want to know more about Bix and the legend of Bix Beiderbecke, there's a great book called Finding Bix. There's only a couple of pictures of Bix. That's one of the pictures of him. And he's a terrible alcoholic, amazing player. One of the sad stories is that every time he recorded a 78, he sent it home to his parents. And finally, one time he went home to his parents' house to see them on one of his tours. And he went to the house and finally opened the closet. And in the closet was all the records he had ever sent them unopened. They'd never listened to him and never opened up any of the records. And that was typical of his life. Always felt unappreciated. It says here, Bix Beiderbecke was one of the first great legends of jazz, among the most innovative cornet soloists of the 1920s, and the first important white player. He invented the jazz ballad and pointed the way to cool jazz. But his recording career lasted just 6 years. He drank himself to death in 1931 at the age of 28. So, if you're interested, Finding Bix Beiderbecke, one of the greats. They do blues. I'm a big blues hound. Lucky enough that I was born at the time of the 60s folk and blues revival, where I got to see a lot of the great bluesmen. I got to see Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and Son House and all those kind of guys. But the album I picked today, another, not unsung, but a guy who's sort of in the background a lot, is Sonny Boy Williamson. And this is the second Sonny Boy Williamson. He actually stole the name. There was another Sonny Boy Williamson, Rice Miller. But, yeah, born 1899 or 1908. No one's really sure. Died 1965. Amazing harmonica player. Played with Muddy Waters and all the big bands. But Otis Spann on here. The Real Folk Blues. Sonny Boy Williamson. Then I went to country. And I did something different for country again. I mean, I love Merle Haggard and I love all the classic country, Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson. But this guy doesn't get any credit because he had one sort of a novelty hit. And he was sort of defined by his novelty hit, and he shouldn't be. And that man was Johnny Paycheck. And I only really got onto Johnny Paycheck because a local DJ here in Portland has a morning country show. And he started playing from a CD called The Original Mr. Heartache. And I listened to those songs and I said, it's the real deal. So this is a great album called Jukebox Charlie and other songs that make jukebox play. Before he did Take This Job and Shove It, which became so you became actually defined by that, his other stuff was Apartment Number 9, Just Between You and Me, Then Love Dies, Meanest Jukebox in Town, just great, great stuff. Dig into Johnny Paycheck's early stuff, and I think you'd be quite surprised and quite pleased by his early stuff. It was just fantastic. The Original Mr. Heartache, Johnny Paycheck. Then went to folk, and again, tried to do a little something different for folk. This is a guy who was friends of Woody Guthrie and Pete Seeger, and hung out with them. He died young of cancer, but one of the great singers of the day was Cisco Houston. Cisco had a deep, rich voice. Absolutely love the way he sings, and this sings the songs of Woody Guthrie. Him and Woody traveled around together a lot, and I think he died like 35 years old in 1962 or something of cancer, which was a shame. But if you like folk singers, you want to hear something a little different, Cisco Houston. Then I went to soul and R&B, and again, you know, I love Otis Redding, I love James Brown, I love all that stuff. But the man I love, who I think, again, is not given his due, is Jackie Wilson, Mr. Dynamite. This is his 20 greatest hits: Reed Petite, Higher and Higher, Lonely Teardrops, Baby Workout. I mean, doesn't get any better than that. And they say he was, Mr. Dynamite worked so hard, he actually had a stroke on stage in the middle of a performance, was taken to the hospital and was in a coma for 8 years or so, and then he passed away. But the man was Mr. Dynamite, Jackie Wilson. Then we went into the vocalists. And the vocalists are people I consider like Frank and Dean, Ella Fitzgerald, all those people. And again, this is more jazz than vocalist, but he's right in there. This is another obscure singer. Unfortunately, this is not the original. This is a repress, but it's a guy named Bob Dorough, and this is an album called Yardbird Suite. Originally, it was called something else, but they changed it for this album when they repressed it. You might know him better for the TV show Schoolhouse Rock in the 80s. He wrote all the songs for that and was instrumental in that show. But early on, he sang with Miles Davis, and on this album, sort of, if you know Mose Allison, similar to Mose Allison, but more scat and harder jazz than Mose. But great piano player, great singer. If you don't have me, look into YouTube. There's got to be some YouTube videos or stuff of playing Bob Dorough. But check him out. The only way this is the original album here on the cover, on the bottom here. And this album, the only reason I know it is I remember in the 1960s, I'm with my dad at, I think it was E.J. Corvette's, which was the department store in New York. And there's a record bin, so we stop and start looking. And he sees the record and he goes, "Oh, Bethlehem Records. They always had good jazz. We should pick it up." I think it was like $1.50. And unfortunately, I lost it now. Now it's worth like 50, 60 bucks. But this is a nice repress. Bob Dorough. And then there's world music, which I really hate the title because it's sort of egocentric for America to think, anything not us is world. But of course, world music encompasses all sorts of genres, whether it's music from Greece or Africa or the Southeast or like Vietnam, whatever, Japanese, whatever. The band I picked is actually an American band, but they play Eastern European music, and the band called the Klezmer Conservatory Band, and this is called Yiddische Renaissance, and it's basically Eastern European Jewish music, 1930s, 40s. I grew up with this stuff. I always heard this around, and I love klezmer music. And if it's something you don't know, if you like gypsy jazz and stuff like that, this is where you should be. Give it a try. Not just them. There's the group called the Klezmatics. There's Klezmer Conservatory Band. There's a number of different klezmer groups, but a lot of fun. And that's the Klezmer Conservatory Band. So that's 10. And then when it came to 11, I decided I needed one more. So the last one I did is a local hero, a guy born here in Maine. He played in his father's country band in the beginning when he was young. And the story is that in the middle of one show with playing with his father's band, he went into a jazz riff in the middle of the song. He was like 16. And they walked off the stage and his father slapped him over the face and said, "Don't you ever do that shit again." And the next day he packed his bags and left home. And his name is Lenny Brew. Lenny Brew was an amazing guitar player. Played, besides 6, he played a 7 and an 8 string guitar. Just unbelievable stuff. This album is the final release, last solo sessions before his death in 1984. He was born in 1940, I think, so he was like 40 some odd years old. There's actually a club here in Maine called Lenny's, where he actually recorded a lot of his early stuff. There he is, very young. And on the wall in the club is a little sign, or a big sign actually, and the sign says, it's a quote from Chet Atkins, and the sign says, "The greatest guitarist who ever walked the face of the earth." That's what Chet Atkins said about him. Lenny Brew, 1941, 1984. Hard to find his stuff on vinyl. This is a beautiful copy. This is a master audiophile direct-to-disc mastering, and it's great. So if you like guitar playing, jazz guitar, and you want to find somebody who've never heard before, a little different, Lenny Brew. And that's my 10/11 picks for my collection. Again, congratulations on 1,000 subs. That's pretty amazing. You well deserve it. And if you don't know Tales from the Crate, you should definitely check his channel out. And until next time, peace.